the server defines UI and behavior, and the clients only renders it and handle some predefined actions.
I'm a big fan of system design interviews, especially when they done right.
That would be the summary.
Hello and welcome to the Architecture Deep Dive podcast. This is a brand new podcast on our channel where we explore various topics on software architecture and system design. I'm your host, Oleksii Petrov, Solutions Architect at Husqvarna Group. Today we're diving deep into the fascinating topic of scaling front-end platforms and server-driven UI. And joining me today is Oleksii Levzhynskyi, Area Tech Lead at Grammarly. Oleksii brings deep expertise from his area, his work at Grammarly. And Oleksii, big thanks for being here. And yeah, I just wanted to ask, could you please start by introducing yourself and maybe tell it a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Oleksii Levzhynskyi. I'm currently Area Tech Lead at Grammarly. About myself, I started writing code probably at university. My very first technology was Ruby on Rails. Then I switched it to the front end, to the web front end. And doing front end for more than, 12 years so far. Working at Grammarly probably more than 8 years. And I'm here today to discuss about the scaling of a web front-end or just the front-end technologies.
I think that'd be great. But first of all, I think one of the questions the audience will have, and I have, is about the Area Tech Lead, about your role, could you tell a little bit about what does an Area Tech Lead do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Great question. Area Tech Lead, basically it's a tech lead for a very specific area. In most of cases, this is an engineer who's driving or leading some cross-team projects, maybe critical, maybe just long ongoing initiatives. For example, at Grammarly, we have a couple of dedicated areas with very specific domain, I would say. For example, the one that I'm working for is the area that's responsible for our clients, Grammarly clients, all of them. Also, another examples might be the group of engineers area that is focusing on the Grammarly on business customer needs, builds some specific features for them, maybe some admin tools. Another area might be about building features on top of clients, and so on. Generally, the responsibilities of the Area Tech Lead, or maybe just Tech Lead of the area, varies across the areas or departments at Grammarly. There is probably, I would like to maybe recommend a good book about possible what basically Area Tech Lead is. There is a staff engineer book, and that describes the possible archetypes of what can be the sort of Area Tech Lead or staff engineers. Definitely, there might be different focuses, it might be just a tech lead that leads to different technical challenges or looking for a solution. It might be sort of the architect archetypes that focusing on very specific, on bringing still not alone, but together with a group on building a specific architecture that will unblock or maybe scale some applications, some efforts at company. And there are a couple more, but generally my responsibilities are about driving cross-team projects, helping to align, facilitate, figure out a technical solution, and work with the group to implement it.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun job to do, I need to say. Thanks for sharing that. Today's episode, I decided to record and discuss the topic we're discussing based on the talk that you gave on FWD's Software Architecture Conference. That was an amazing talk about the scaling of the front-end platforms at Grammarly. I liked it a lot, and I wanted to discuss diving deep actually into the topic itself. But the first thing first. I had a question about scaling front-end platforms, like the title you named your talk, because I'm mostly from the back-end development experience. In our world, scaling means adding more power, adding more compute, adding more stuff to the system. So I was curious, what do you mean by scaling the front-end platform, and how it happens? Can we elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Actually, it's a great and I would say fascinating topic to work in. And when we are talking about the front end here, first of all, the front end is not only a web. At least at Grammarly, and generally, front end is about whatever the user is working with on the desktop, mobiles. So, for example, our department in Grammarly, when we are talking about front-end, it's about desktop applications, it's about mobile application, it's about web application. So in this case, it might be multiple technologies. So it's not only about the JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever. It's not about web, it's also about for example, if it's for macOS or iOS, it's Swift written application. If it's for Windows, it's most likely .NET, C#. And if it's for Android, it might be Kotlin, for example. So when we are talking about the scaling front end, it means that we would like to deliver the same user experience across all of these platforms. And definitely there are multiple approaches on how to do it, to replicate, to figure out some platforms that will deploy, bring the same features across all of them. And the flavors of this platform might be very different. It really depends on the number of the technologies you're going to use, and so on and so on. To second on you mentioned that definitely on the back end, it's a bit about maybe scaling, adding more power. We even in our interview process, we have a very specific interview. It's dedicated to system design, and it's not about the classical system design when you ask it about figuring out how to shard databases on scale. It's mostly about the architecture of the front end application, how you will build an application, how you will combine all these modules, how you will communicate with the server. So it's definitely a slightly different, but still quite exciting part of the work.
And can we say that scaling is also about adding new platforms? Because you mentioned you have a bunch of products delivering similar experience. So would it be like scaling, add one more, like we scaled it to more places, we showed the UI and work with the customers?
It's a great point. It really depends on the definition of the platform. So if it's more like expanding to other possible platforms, I don't know, to Linux, let's say. In our case, it's not about it. But if we will talk about but still, it would be very specific to the Grammarly, because we are doing integration into third parties. We are decorating the user text, showing some, underlines on top of the text fields. So in this case, our goal is to scale and support as much surfaces as possible. We are generally, it makes sense. It makes sense if you would like to scale to another technology. Definitely, another platform. Definitely, you most likely will end up with a platform. If you're building a platform, you will end up with having a possibility to scale. It might not be that easy because still depending on how you're going to build it, whether it's based on web, let's say, then you most likely for a new platform you will have to find third parties that will be able to run a web, or maybe you will have to build it. On the other hand, if you're using sort of server-driven UIs that we are going to talk today, then we will have to implement some client-side, I don't know, render the parts that will show the server response. How to say, configurations that sent by server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned system design interview in your process. I'm a big fan of system design interviews, especially when they done right. I mean, because many people perceive that this is like a task to build something big or to build a certain thing, but it's more of a topic to discuss in general, canvas for conversation. So yeah, I'm glad that you have this in the process, and that sounds fun to do. And talking about that, maybe, just maybe, you ask in your system design interview about the typical strategies and approaches, how to unify the platform or how to scale the platform. If you were going through that interview, what would you answer to that questions? What are the typical strategies and approaches to platform scaling and unification?
Yeah, for sure. Just a side note regarding the system design interview, I would like to advertise your talk that you gave 4 or 5 years ago about the system design of FW days. Basically that talk inspired me to give another talk about front-end system design. So thank you so much. But generally, at least at Grammarly, we are not. So the idea of the platform is to isolate development to very platform, not a platform. The idea of sort of platformization when you're building a solution that will help you to deliver the same feature across multiple, let's say, platforms or interfaces. There might be confusion platform and to deliver on platform. But yeah, the idea is that you are making life of the engineers who are going to work on features much simpler. So they don't need to think about how this platformization approach will work. They should be focusing on very specific task. So they need to bring a new button. They need to write a new logic. They need to somehow maybe process, user input. It might be heavy computation, but still they need to focus on it, not on how to integrate or how to build it across all the possible technologies, let's say. But back to your question. If someone would ask me what is a proper approach to the platformization, I would say obviously it depends. It depends on your domain. It depends on your goal of what kind of platforms you would like to support. What are limitations of your domain? For example, if someone is building, still there are probably a couple of layers, but let's start from the most the big one. If you're building a web application or just an application, let's say, if you're building applications that do not need to interact with let's say user environment like operational system a lot, maybe you will upload or download files and that's it. In this case, you don't need to invent something new. You may go ahead and use existing frameworks like Tauri or Electron that will simply wrap your web application, and you will pretend that this is like a native desktop one. In this case, it's a very simple, short quick approach because you are leveraging existing tools to to deploy, deliver, wrap, and handle, isolate your application from the outer world. But if your domain is a bit more sophisticated, for example, like in Grammarly case, we are not building just an application like the application in the box. Our domain is about integrating into third parties. We need to render, like I mentioned before, we need to render decorations on top of the of UI of other applications. And unfortunately, at least when we started the platformization scaling, like I don't know, 5-10 years ago. It wasn't possible with web technologies. They were slow. There were a lot of limitations. Tool set wasn't ready. Now it's much better, but still there are some challenges. You need to build a custom wrappers. You need to build a custom integration layer, because you have to work with the low-level operational system API. So, kind of to summarize this part, it depends. It really depends on your and also I didn't mention about the mobiles. If you would like to support mobiles, it's another story. Not still. It depends. It's just if it's application, probably you may find a wrapper for your web and run just web on mobile. But if it's again about the integration into another application, like for example at Grammarly we have a keyboard for iOS, then web cannot, let's say, be helpful here. Yeah. Other approaches might be I would say. If it's a typical one, let's go ahead and use web most likely. If it's non-typical one, then you have a couple of approaches. The one approach might be to move as much as possible to the server, and server will provide some template configuration. It will use some DSL, something like HTML-like, and the client will have to just render it and react to the user inputs. This might be one approach. We will talk about it later. Another more straightforward might be to just replicate, rewrite the same on the multiple technologies. In this case, you may think about how to share, let's say, common utilities, how to share common, algorithms that you are using on all the platforms. Once again, most likely, if you're talking about the scaling, then you have to deliver the same user experience, the same features. So under the hood, the code, most likely, the business logic will be the same. So in this case, you may think about sort of multi-platform technologies that allows you to write once and compile into multiple languages. It not always works. There are some issues with that, but in theory, you can try.
Yep. Actually, yeah, that's one of the approaches we use in our mobile apps. So we try to lean towards like React Native and trying to unify the code base. Of course, there are a lot of challenges. You probably know all of them working with those technologies. But anyway, I think it is a time to talk about the elephant in the room, about the server-driven UI. Because in your talk you mentioned you've been using it and you had some experience with it. And I really want to know like what it's like to be doing that. But first of all, like maybe to set a canvas for people who just joined and had never heard about that, like what is a server-driven UI? Can you make any definition of it?
Server-driven UI is basically the UI that is controlled by the server. The very simple example might be like, 10 years, 12, 15 years ago, everything was rendered on the server with the HTML. Then HTML was delivered to the client and simply rendered. And as soon as user clicks on any link, on next page, whatever, the same would be repeated. Like the request will be sent to the server renders a new content, and basically the page reloads. This is it's slightly far away from the server-driven UI, but the idea is kind of the same. So we would like to move as much as possible of the responsibilities for the UI to the server, and and the client should remain a very, very small one, like just with the logic just to render whatever the server will send. Maybe try to, if we will try to summarize, so the server defines UI and behavior, and the clients only renders it and handles some predefined actions.
Yeah, I think that
would be the summary.
Yeah, I think I've heard a nice quote about that, saying that server-driven UI is how backend developers think about the front-end developer, or by UI development, trying to define everything. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned like the extremes of it. I mean, like the HTML and UI like rendered on the server fully completely with HTML and CSS, or maybe inline styling. That was back in the day. But so it gives me like a scale or like possible options of like two extremes, I would say. Like on the one hand, we have client-driven UI, right? So if you have server-driven UI, we need to have client-driven UI, which is basically says
Obviously.
we take the data from the server and we just create a UI purely on a client. So we have another extreme server-driven UI when we basically tell the client what exactly they should show, where it's located, pixel by pixel, probably, like HTML and CSS, like we had in the history. And now we say that we need to find something in the middle because we do not want to show like HTML theme, like a fully rendered page or a screen, and we do not want to send just data because we want to have some kind of control. So the question would be like, where is that middle? Like, what's reasonable to use for server-driven UI as an abstraction? Like, where do we stop? Do you have an answer to that? Like, what do you use?
It's a great question. Probably I don't have a very strict answer to it. In my understanding, the server-driven UI is not in the middle. It's a bit closer to the server. Still, it's not really a backend engineers is going to work on it. At the end of the day, all the control of the configuration, or let's say the presentation layer will be a responsibility of the front-end engineers. The only difference would be that they will have to write code on the server. It might be even the same technology. It might be written, I don't know, in the same TypeScript. But anyways, this configuration must be plugged in somehow into the server that process the user requests. Let's say. Regarding to the where is the kind of middle, or where is the border in between what should be, how to decide what should be on the server, what should be on the client. Unfortunately, it probably one more time it depends, because there is no standard protocol for server-driven UI. In the internet, there are mostly guidance on how it might be implemented, what the best practices might be. There are a couple of public talks about that someone implemented server-driven UI and why it was helpful for them. But in general, maybe to answer this question, I would like to sort of step back and talk a bit about the domain and where it might be used in what cases it makes sense to explore the server-driven UI.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And also, like before diving deep into the like actual contents, maybe of the protocol or protocol implementation, if you can talk a little bit about the architecture of server-driven UI solution. So you'll start maybe from the domain, like where we can use it, and then like maybe what is the typical architecture of such a solution?
Yeah, for sure. From regarding to the domain, so obviously it makes sense to think about implementing something like server-driven UI when you have some limitation on the client. There might be a couple of cases. The one might be the limitation that, for example, you need to use a multiple technology. You have a multiple clients, and you have to write in the multiple languages. So you cannot use the same, let's say, technology, the same language to define, I don't know, all these features, all the same features. This might be the first case. Another case, it's probably even more common. It's the case when you would like to avoid releasing to passing through the typical release process. It's especially relevant for mobiles when you need to in case of mobiles, you are not in the control of the release flow. Before the publishing, you have to submit it for the vendor store review. and wait, I don't know, day, couple of hours. Really depends from the vendor store policies. You have to wait to release a new version, and it might not be flexible enough in case you have a very dynamic UI. For example, every couple of days you need to deploy or start a new, I don't know, campaign for a very specific area. So you cannot, I don't know, we may imagine like the applications that somehow related to the public events. And in this application, you would like to start different advertisements. You would like to slightly change the UI, but at the end of the day, it will be just a feed of events. What's happening? It might be, for example, it might be, I don't know, dev events. Today in this city, there are a couple of conferences. Then tomorrow there is another city, the big conference, and for some reason, someone asked you to run a campaign to promote a very specific dev conference. So you need to go ahead to modify your UI and deploy deploy a new version. Instead, you may think about what if all these campaigns, everything will be defined on the backend, and still, because it's like sort of advertisement, there might be different assets, different pictures, you might need to modify the color of the button. So eventually, you may, after by writing down, modifying your application, you may end up with writing a very, very detailed DSL on how to run this campaign. And at some point of time, you may realize that you're basically doing a server-driven UI, because you're defining all the details, even down to the colors of the buttons, the position of the buttons on the server, and deploying. So it might be another case. So generally, there are a couple of domains. The ones that you would like to quickly update your relative UI that consist of relatively static components. It's like pictures, buttons, text, maybe with different position, different colors, and you would like to avoid doing a release, passing through the vendor store review. So you would like to do this almost immediately, just with the deploy of the server. And another case that is relevant for Grammarly, it's basically when you need to build the same feature across multiple platforms. So yeah, this probably the first one. It's about the domain.
Yeah, I see. You have a great slide about the software architecture of the SDUI solution. Can you please guide me through a couple of components here? So what do we see like on a slide?
Yeah, definitely. Still, this is a very simplified version. It's based on what we have at Grammarly. Most likely, it will be similar to us, the server-driven architecture. Still, the classical one, a couple of rectangles that represent the client and the server. In this case, it's called backend, and on the left there is a client. So everything starts probably on the client, on the very left. It might be a native client. The client might be written in Swift, let's say. It might be web client. Obviously, user opens it. Client is requesting the UI state from the backend, maybe sending, I don't know, initial information about the environment, about the setup, about the, I don't know, even user, maybe some user configuration, and backend is under the hood using a couple of components. So yeah, probably this one is this diagram is related, is about the Grammarly. So basically at Grammarly, user focuses into the text, and Grammarly have to underline, show as suggestions. So to generate a suggestion, obviously we have a dedicated service. It's very complex. In this slide, it's just a one rectangle, but under the hood is a whole new world with a lot of components, with a lot of different I don't know, checking services, LLMs, whatever. And the first thing is to generate some content, generated suggestions. After that, we have a on this slide is SDUI schema, let's say version 2, that defines on how all these suggestions should look like. And the definition of the schema is the responsibility of the front-end developers. So whenever you need to build a new feature, you go ahead and update the schema. And probably on this slide, this SDUI schema is two things in one. Because, like, first of all, you have a schema that defines all possible components that you might use. It might be a button, it might be a select, it might be a carousel, whatever. And on the other hand, you need a place where you're going to define how suggestions, how whatever content that needs to be delivered and shown to the user will look like. And in this case, it's the responsibility of the UI component builder. That's inside the backend rectangle. In this UI component builder, you're going to kind of define on how to present a very specific suggestion. Still, this diagram is very simplified. Obviously, you are defining the look and feel of the components. It might be a huge feed, for example, in a separate module, I would say. For some reason, I merged it into the backend here, but yeah, generally, this is how it works.
Yeah,
you have a client, you have a backend. On backend, you are defining. First of all, you have a very specific schema. It might have different versions, and also you need to think about that. You have to support the legacy versions because it's a client. Someone may be on very old version and don't want to update or cannot update due to some technical limitations. So you have a schema and you have a component builder where you're defining as a sort of look and feel of the content.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'm glad you mentioned versions and older clients, because that's something I wanted to ask. So let's say we create a new component, right? So you mentioned you have a tool around it, component builder, if I'm correct, right? Mm-hmm. So you create that, you say, I have a new component which called, I don't know, new component v1, right? And then you start to push that component to clients or answering to clients' question that, hey, show new component. And some clients will not have that component, right? Because I see there is a component library. So what would you do in such a case? Or will you check on the backend, like whether a client has that component in its component library based on its version, or will it handle that on a client?
I would say this is the most complex topic for server-driven UIs. I would say the creating of a brand new component. If we will talk about the versioning, yes, the way how it's implemented, for example, at Grammarly, is that every client, first of all, notifies in the very first request to the server. It specifies what kind of version they do support of the schema, and also and generally that would be enough. There is obviously a list of additional features that our client may support, but yeah, the schema version is a primary one. And depending on the schema, server defines on how to render components, whether it's okay to use the button v1, or we already can use button v2. The deprecation is the most complex piece of this system. It's so far we probably never deprecated. So inside the code, you have to always kind of specify a fallback to the previous how this should behave for the, let's say, old clients. In most of cases, the new components are needed for new features. So it's also a combination of like a schema plus a feature. For example, the old legacy client will not request a new modern feature. So it's not going to be a problem, and user eventually will update to the latest version.
So basically, you need to create a version anytime you add a new component or change a component, right? Because if you added like a field or rename the field, something like that, it will
here probably there are two pieces. So when we are talking about the components, we are talking about the schema, like the basic components that are supported by the clients. The actual the benefit of server-driven UI is that ideally you need to define the schema. You just need to define the list of all possible components that you're going to ever use. And then everything else, like for example, if it's going to be a new suggestion or a new grouping on the, I don't know, a new color of the button, whatever, you need to define this inside the UI component builder, let's say. And for that, you don't need to update client. This is probably the important piece about the kind of moving UI to the backend. So you need to split like the basic things that will never change, or if it will change, it should be very I don't know. Every new component should be quite flexible because you don't have a power to quickly update all the clients. And basically, this is the goal of SDUI, to avoid additional releases and breaking changes. I have a couple of slides regarding to the. It's still, we switched from the definition of SDUI to pros and cons of SDUI, but probably right now it makes sense to talk about it. So the power of SDUI is when you would like to change the layout, let's say. So when new feature can be built from the existing components. So on this slide, you just, I don't know, you rearranging buttons, even not the buttons, in this case, lines. And for example, if you would like to change the color from, say, green to blue, it's relatively easy, depending on the change, depending on whether you're going to run a couple of experiments or you already know what you're building. It might be even 1 hour, a couple of hours, let's say, for sure, if you're familiar with the whole pipeline. But there are cases when probably this one, when you would like to build a completely brand new element. For example, in this case, someone would like to inject an input field into the existing suggestion card. This is a Grammarly suggestion card, like some simplified version. In this case, obviously, you have to update the component library. You have to ensure that every single client do support it, and you have to release, wait, and still on the tooling level, it's not big deal. It's basically you need to specify a new version. All clients will not get these components. They will fall back to the simplified version, let's say, of the suggestion of the UI, or maybe you will exclude this old legacy clients. But anyway, the process of, let's say, delivering is slightly longer. That's why in combination, when you are using server-driven UI, it's important to kind of have a more or less stable concept of the possible UI components.
Yeah, that's totally makes sense. And also I wanted to ask, like, when we define, we talked about components, like small things like buttons and pop-up, maybe not pop-ups, but maybe some titles and other stuff. But when you define a server UI, like, response, do you response like a full view, a section in a view? What is an abstraction used there? Like, because in the web world, that'd be a page, right? Probably, or maybe a section of a page. So which level of abstraction you use here, and what is the component you put into response?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. In our case, it's there are two primary, how to say, areas or surfaces where we use server-driven UI. Both of them are related to Grammarly suggestions, but probably the smallest component, how to say abstraction component, probably would be the Grammarly suggestion. Even if we will, I don't know, open the same slide, in the middle with a green button or with a blue button on the right, this is a typical Grammarly suggestion. So there is a title, there is a basically content that actual content of the suggestion in the middle, and a couple of actions. I would say this is the smallest smallest SDUI components that we are sending to the client. Still, it depends on the domain. In Grammarly case, we have to, when user hover over underline, we have to show some small piece of UI. Obviously, if it would be bigger, then the smallest piece of SDUI would be bigger as well. Also, another piece is long form assistant, or like if you will go ahead and use, let's say, Grammarly on app.grammarly.com, there is a big sidebar with a list of all possible suggestions for the text. And this is also defined with a server-driven UI. We have a concept of the feed. We have a concept of the cards within this feed. Every card might be maybe in two states, like the minified, let's say just one line, or full card when it's opened, like on this slide in the middle. This is like an opened card. And all this information have to be sent to the client in advance, just to ensure that there is low latency in between user clicks on the card and let's say expands, for example. So it's not really in. Like it's not a page, it's a whole page. It's sort of a JSON that defines the possible states and describes the layout and components inside the card. I have another slide, by the way, with example, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, you have actions
yeah,
here.
so I can.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about
sure.
actions. So the question in my head was like, when I said I clicked the button, something changed. Like I think two questions maybe here. First, the connection of that component with the rest of the application, because like it's sent from the server and you define an action here dynamically. So the other part of application need to know like what to do with that action and what actions can be. Right. So is it something defined in component library? Is it a list of actions supported by a component, or how is it handled? Let's start from there.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I would say at the same time we figured out that this is a big limitation for us. But anyway, it was a very challenging task to solve for Grammarly, because at Grammarly the UI is very dynamic, because as soon as user types, we need to update UI. We need to generate new suggestions. We need to show them. Some underlines need to be removed. The state of the, let's say, kind of sidebar feed of cards needs to be updated immediately, almost without any delays. And because of that, all the components, all the server-driven UI components have to be somehow plugged or kind of interact with the state on the client. So for the sort of behavior of actions, there is definitely a list of predefined actions. This also piece that needs to be kind of hard coded or handled properly on every client. So except for the renderer that renders, just kind of hydrates or renders the components, there should be a library that knows how to handle all this. Maybe not the library, but there is kind of inside of this renderer, there is a hard-coded list of actions that potentially can be handled by the client. And on client side, all these events must be handled appropriately with very specific, most likely language, with very specific implementation on the, let's say, native language. So it will be, the handling will be written in, let's say, Swift or JavaScript, depending on the platform. And this is another place where if you would like to add a new action, you most likely have to go ahead and update the clients. Still, it really depends on the kind of action, but generally, in most of cases, I would say it leads to the update of the client. Just because, for example, if the very typical on this slide is like when user click accept, and you need to update the user text. So it cannot be implemented without the change in the client behavior. For sure, it needs to be implemented once. When user clicks, then you need to call the method that will go ahead and replace the text with given suggested text, let's say. But after it will be after it implemented, you just need to go ahead and call it in any place in your DSL, in your SDUI response.
Is there a task like when you click on an action or apply an action to make change not in the current component but in the other component, which can be or cannot be present on a page? Did you have such a case?
Let me think about. Generally, but it's still there are a couple of cases like the total counter of the list of the alerts. But yeah, this is handled by the renderer. Another thing, it's like a filter. Filter is also handled by it's like an action. This action is handled by the renderer as well. So it's predefined when you need to filter by very specific attribute, maybe by value, maybe by category or whatever. It's also predefined. So yeah, in general, but still there is a quite powerful the client-side library that knows how to handle all these actions. In theory, there is a way to even make it more even less client dependent when for every single user action the client have to, let's say, for every single user action, client sends request to the backend, and backend responds with a way on how this in this particular case UI should be updated. This is probably another extreme. It would be closer to the classical HTML approach, but it makes sense in some cases, especially when you're working in very isolated environment, and you don't need to be you don't need to deliver the change as soon as possible. Maybe it might be a fit when you're okay to click something or delete something, or maybe add to the cart, and you're fine to wait half a second, for example, for the latency. Now in our case, most of these actions are handled optimistically on the client side.
Got it. I didn't ask in the beginning, but I think it's a good place to ask you here, maybe, to name some of the platforms that you use this approach with. So you mentioned the mobile clients. Are you talking about the app or keyboard, or like what products do you currently use server-driven UI?
Yeah, server-driven UI so far is used on only on desktop platforms. We are not using it on the mobiles. It's used on the browser extensions. So in all browsers in TypeScript, obviously. It's also used for native clients for macOS and Windows. On all platforms, it's used for like inline cards when you hover over the underline, or when you're clicking on green primary button to open a list of cards, let's say, to review all of them. So it's also powered by the server-driven UI, but this DSL, so it defines basically what should be the next card, where the underline should be, what some actions and so on.
Got it. Circling back, like on the schema and the slide we're currently having here, do you use like a custom protocol, custom schema, like definition, or do you use any available, or are there any available protocols for the server-driven UI and schema?
For server-driven UI, we have very own protocol. It's still the domain is very specific, and there is no ready to use protocol. I would think that in terms of server-driven UI, it probably would be hard to imagine something that's ready unless there is a very low-level protocol that's I don't know, you are using to communicate, I don't know, some changes to the client and get responses. But yeah, we have implemented a very old protocol. We have implemented very own protocol. We have implemented very own definition, the very own DSL that describes components, the position of the component, maybe some typical styles. Also under the hood, we are using the design systems that helps us to communicate the changes or styles between the server and the client. But yeah, generally it's a custom one.
Got it. I was curious because I thought that maybe some products exist, like a component library definition tool that will help you to create a component and then, like, I don't know, response that there is such a component with such a version or something like that,
I would not be surprised that there is at least some basic libraries, but under the hood, it's. For us, we have a lot of very custom logic. We have very custom, I don't know, filtering, custom positioning, custom, I would say, attachment to the UI on the screen. So in our case, it was much easier to just use our internal design system to power the DSL, to power the list of components.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And preparing for this talk, for this discussion, I watched a couple of videos on server-driven UI, of course, from different companies, just to name them, that companies like Netflix, Airbnb, Lyft, Twitch, they all use server-driven UI or used back in the day. And given that, like, you've been working with this for a while, and I wanted to ask about your impressions or your takeaways from working with the server-driven UI, when it's a good fit, when it's a bad fit, like, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are always pros and cons in terms of using different technologies. I would say for server-driven UI, it makes sense when you have a very static, I would say, very static UI concepts, and you need just to iterate quickly on them. For example, you have a feed of some similar elements, and all the possible buttons, all the possible selects and lists, and the primary use case for it is that you're going to change, say, order, let's say, or maybe colors, or maybe style. But in case you need to build a completely new, let's say, user experience, or you need to you would like to experiment on some new approaches on how to interact with the user, build a completely new feature. In this case, SDUI is a big limitation because still it doesn't allow you to quickly go out of the, let's say, box of your application. Because for every new kind of UI, you have to build a new component, and you need to be sure that it's supported. So in these cases, for example, in our case, at some point of time, we realized that we would like to build a new user experience that's not only about the existing cards, that's not only about the feed of cards, and we face it with a huge limitation of SDUI. For example, that's why not on top of SDUI, but in parallel to the SDUI, we're exploring the using web to build any possible features that we would like. But SDUI is still very useful for very specific surfaces primarily. It still allows to build new features that related to, let's say, cards very quickly.
Got it.
So I would say, maybe to kind of summarize, the benefit, the power of the SDUI is when you have a static list of UI concept. In this case, as soon as it is built, you can move faster. A lot of teams may work in the same feature, in the same surface. But in case you need to build something very new, completely new, then SDUI might be a limitation, and you probably will need to find a sort of workaround on how to run experiment first and then sort of backport it to the SDUI.
Yeah, that makes sense. And given that, like, what is the next step in Grammarly's architectural evolution? Like, is it a web view, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, the next step is web view. I would say it's quite a simple answer. First of all, historically, we were limited with the web views because kind of like I mentioned in the beginning, the existing tools doesn't fit for our domain because we need to kind of render a lot on top of the existing application in the operational system, in the browsers and so on. So in browsers, obviously web is the only option, but for the operational system, it wasn't that simple, and also there is a huge there is anyway big layer of the native codes that we need to use to interact with the low-level API. But recently, our engineers found a way how to overcome some limitations of the web views, and also explored the Tauri that allows to run quite a lightweight, I would say, applications on the desktop. Right now we are exploring, I would say, building a solution that will help us to run web components on every single platform, and not really on every single, at least on desktop platforms. There are still some limitation for our domain on mobiles, but we are actively working on solving it.
Actually, the question about the mobiles, you mentioned that currently server-driven UI is used mostly in desktop app and plugins. But do you know if that's actually true, that you can like push your changes on mobiles without a review with server-driven UI? Because I've heard there are some challenges with that as well.
It's true, because still is the purpose of review. Of reviewing of vendor store review is to ensure that every single application is does not violate in user privacy, some rules, do not inject some harmful code into it. And with server-driven UI, with DSL, you don't really have a way to do so, because it's like just a high level, like a markup language, let's say. So you don't have a JavaScript inside of it. You don't have anything that should be executed, evaluated, or whatever. So it's just a configuration on how your UI should look like. And everything else, the actual logic, is inside it's hard-coded, written natively, and it's already reviewed. So you are not bringing any new, any new code into the application. You rather providing the configuration on how this application should look like. So because of that, there is no challenges in bringing it into the mobile. It's like just providing a config. The thing is, it's very dynamic config, and it depends on what user clicked, let's say, but generally it's fine. Also, it's not really big difference from the wrapper over the web, for example. Mm-hmm. In general, it makes sense. In our case, the challenge is that a UI on mobile is very, very different from the desktop, and the set of features is very different, especially when we are talking about the iOS keyboard. There is a very strict limitation on RAM that can be used by the keyboard. So, and also just generally not not all the features that we have on mobile on desktop does make sense on the mobile. So you don't need the list of, let's say, full list of cards that will occupy the whole screen. You need to present it in a different way. It makes sense. It's possible. In general, why not? It's just a configuration. But in our case, we haven't done this yet.
Got it. And as we approach the end of our sessions today, I wanted to ask, what kind of advice would you give to teams facing the similar challenges of scaling their front-end platforms? Maybe you have what top 3 advices or something like that.
Yeah, it's great. First of all, probably think twice before scaling. And spend a lot of time on thinking about the approach you would like to build. Ideally, the scaling should come from already partially implemented solution. When you're building something from scratch, it will take a while. Especially if you have a legacy, or not the legacy, existing applications. So the challenge of building sort of a platform that you should, to build a platform takes a time. It's quite a challenging task. But at the same time, obviously, company cannot stop building new features on existing platform. So you may appear in the state that your platform is always behind the current demand. So you need to kind of be quick enough to not lose the idea of the platform. So probably here I may provide a couple of suggestions. First of all, try to start with something that you already have. Maybe you already have a couple of components that you would like to reuse. Try to not to build from scratch, but rather build infrastructure around reuse of these components. This might be the first approach. Maybe if still you need to build something from zero, then try to focus on the most important and most critical features right now. Ideally, it might be a new feature. In this case, new and kind of isolated feature. In this case, it would be much simpler to build some MVP for the platform and start building a new feature on this platform. Yes, it will work in parallel with the existing application. It may even slow down the performance slightly, but in this case, you will be able to quickly validate that this platform, this reuse makes sense.
Yeah,
I would say this is a couple. And maybe the third one would be continuously re-evaluate your approaches, because it's something that wasn't possible today. It might be possible in a couple of years. So even if you would decide not to build a platform, not to reuse the code, but time to time, once in a year, try to challenge. What if there is a technology? What if there is a way to run web? What is a way to run, there is a way to run Swift on Windows, Swift apps, and vice versa. So why not? So try.
Yeah, sounds like a good stuff to me and pure gold. I hope that people will listen and adhere to your advices as well as I do. So that wraps up today's episode of Architecture Deep Dive. A big thanks to Oleksii for joining us today. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe us. And stay tuned for future deep dive episodes. See you next time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.